Hi there, this is Solitaire Ronan from Solitaire Ronan Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review is from 1973, and its property is no longer a theft, written and directed by Elio Petri, starring Ugo Tognazzi, Flavio Bucci, Daria Nicolodi, Mario Scaccia, Salva Randone. As you may or may not know, I've done a couple of Petri reviews, 10th Victim, and Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, which is a lovely title. I really need to get more Petri, but they're quite difficult to get. L'Assassino is also an Arrow Academy, and this is an Arrow Academy Blu-ray. If property is no longer a theft. But his other films are pretty hard to get. Unfortunately, he died age 53, so he didn't actually make that many films. But he is rapidly going up my director ratings, along with The Dardennes and Tsukamoto. So this Arrow edition is a Blu-ray DVD combo and has a booklet. It also has a wonderful interview with Flavio Bucci, which is a good length. It also has a new interview with producer Claudio Mancini, who was the producer on Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West, for example. Produced a lot of Italian films. And there's a new interview with the makeup artist Pier Antonio Michachi. It's another amazing Petri film. The score is by Morricone, conducted by Bruno Nicolai. It's a really playful score. The film isn't heavily scored, but it's a playful score, but it also has tension in it. Petri, who was a fairly big communist, so it's another political film about capitalism, but again it has dazzling cinematography, and the production design is amazing. And there's a real kind of sense of, yes, it's happening in this world, or at this time, but with his other films there is a kind of almost absurdist futurism going on, just with the architecture that's used. Because Rome, again set in Rome, but Rome's a kind of funny city. It obviously has a lot of old architecture, but it also has new architecture, certainly in the 60s and 70s, more kind of avant-garde. That's not probably the right description, but kind of more strange looking architecture. So this is a simple story of a bank teller who is poor and he's sick of counting rich people's money, especially this butcher who is corrupt, played by Tognazzi. So he takes it upon himself, he quits his job, and he wants to take everything Tognazzi has, that he has earned through ill-gotten gains. It starts with his knife, his butcher knife, and then his hat, and then his car, and eventually his mistress, Dario Nicolodi's character. It is another jaw-droppingly amazing film by Petri, in my opinion. So the film starts with a bank robbery. Again, the set of the robbery was in an abandoned church and they made it out to look like a bank. So again, you've got the money as religion theme. And again, it just has this wonderful absurdist line through it as well. It's hardly surprising that I don't think Petri's films at the time kind of got the credit. And he's only really getting kind of noticed the past decade or so, I think. But it is an amazing film, and there's lovely little details like the bank teller, played by Bucci, who's called Total, he's actually allergic to money. So he's scratching a lot when he's working in the bank because he is actually allergic to money and he wears gloves. But you have this wonderful bank robbery to start the film off. And when the bank tellers press the kind of security button, attack dogs actually come out from under the bench, which is quite unusual. You don't usually see that. So he takes it upon himself to take, or to attempt to take everything this butcher has. I mean, even the butcher's shop is kind of set with marble. It's an amazing set, and there's like a quote engraved in the marble about a man as a carnivore. And like I said, he starts with his butcher knife. That's his favourite knife. That's the knife that he cut his first bit of meat with. And again, later on in the film, he robs the apartment, which again is this kind of futuristic looking apartment building in Rome. And then he kind of robs Nickelodeon's character as well while she's in the apartment. She has an interesting role. Again, people might view it as a bit misogynistic, but again, it's about people as objects. So she's essentially just a possession of the butcher. He's maybe 20 years older than her. She essentially just gives him sex when he wants it, and he gives her jewellery and possessions, and she is essentially just a glorified possession of him. When they're having sex, she tells him the things that he wants to hear about how strong and powerful he is. It's a really good performance. I mean, later on, obviously she would kind of be more famous for being in Argento films, and she almost does give a performance of being in a horror film. There is elements of giallo, kind of a little nod to giallo. Total at one point is wearing a hat that he's stolen from the butcher and a stocking over his face, and he's brandishing the butcher knife. So again, there's kind of playful nods to the giallo genre. There's the character of the police officer who investigates the robbery, and of course the butcher fakes that a lot more possessions have been stolen so they can claim the insurance money. And again, the police officer is kind of complicit in that as well. He's like, oh yeah, tell him that it was worth more. So everybody's kind of corrupt in this search and lust for money. Toto lives with his father, and of course his father's all about, theft's bad, but then later in the film where he actually has money, it's like, can I have more money? Again, it's a fairly cynical view, as his other films are. A very satirical view of it. So it's far from Italian neorealism as you can probably get. And again, Petri does interesting things not only with the camera, but he also has moments where each of the characters are talking to the camera. There's just black background and they're just in a spotlight essentially, and they are explaining their motivations. Nickelodeon's one is very powerful again, whereas she is just calling herself an object, a possession essentially, and parts of her anatomy are just parts of the thing that she is. Because again, she is your classic younger woman being taken by a rich older man, essentially, and then provided for with jewellery and a home and whatever. There's no suggestion that they have feelings for each other whatsoever. As she says, it's just like a job. Being with the butcher, I think obviously there's undertones to the fact that he is a butcher. I think that's fairly clear and obvious, seeing it's in 70s Italy. It's very clear why he's a butcher. That's his profession. There's another character that Total meets with, and that's an older thief, Albertoni, who has been thieving for 43 years. We're introduced to him. He's a nightclub performer who does the man-woman split down the middle act, and then goes into a speech about all the euphemisms for male genitalia. And he has a gang of young men that help him with his robberies, and then Total gets involved with him because he wants him to help rob the butcher pretty much of everything in his flat rather than just jewellery and the odd thing, because he wants to make him poor. And again, there's wonderful lines of dialogue about if you actually want to be a thief, you need to become rich, and that's how you do it properly. There's also things like, well, you're not a thief, but you're not honest, so what does that actually make you? It's full of wonderful philosophy. The character of Albertoni is absolutely wonderful. It's a shame that we only really meet him in the second half of the film. It's a great performance by Mario Schiacci, who again, there'll be actors in it that you maybe don't recognise the names, but you'll recognise the faces. And he's absolutely wonderful. All the actors are fantastic. They give great performances. And there's a speech that a character gives later in the film. I won't go into spoilers about kind of the setting of the speech, but it's one of the great speeches in cinema, where he's talking about the importance of thieves to society, as far as all the people that would be out of work if it wasn't for thieves doing their job. And it's actually an amazing speech. And again, there's a few cutaways from the character, but it's pretty much just the camera in front of the character. It's just a wonderful speech. So the film again is about capitalism. It's about how the rich just want more and what they have. And again, it's one point in the film the butcher does kind of say, well, I would give everything I have away as long as everybody else did it, as long as all the other rich people did it. And even when he loses certain small things, he can't actually live with the fact that he's lost even these small things. He has to get them back. It's just wonderful. This was made after Citizen Above Suspicion, Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, and Working Class Go to Paradise, which I've ordered on an Italian DVD because I have to try and see as many Elio Petri films as I possibly can, because the ones I've seen are absolutely fantastic. So this was kind of a run, a really good run that Petri was on, and obviously worked with Volonte a lot, but Ugo Tognazzi is really good as the butcher. There's a lot of truth in the film, as you'd expect, as far as capitalism and ownership, not only of property, but in the case of Daria Nicolodi's character, obviously people as well. Total's character changes, because again, people who don't have money and then have money, who always say, oh, if I had money I wouldn't change, I would be exactly the same person. That's not actually the case, obviously, because with money comes power. Again, it's a running theme with Petri's work, the fact that everybody's kind of complicit. The police are on the side of the rich, and there's a wonderful scene where the police interview Total involving a sack. It's full of just wonderful imagery, and again, Petri playing with the fourth wall, as far as characters explaining to the camera who they are and what they do, their motivations. It's just a wonderful film, and I would highly recommend you checking it out. Again, it's Arrow Academy. I'm sure you can pick it up cheaply in the next Arrow sale or whatever, but I would highly recommend it, along with Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, and The 10th Victim, and also Assassino with Mastriani, which is Petri's debut, which isn't as good as the other ones. You can kind of see it as a debut, but there's some good stuff in it, and there's some stuff that doesn't quite work. It's not quite as kind of refined and streamlined as perhaps some of his other films. But I mean, there's Petri films I really need to see that are quite hard to get, that have both Volonte and Mastriani in them. So hopefully I'll be able to track them down at some point, because I think he is really underappreciated. I mean, I had no idea of really who he was until a couple of years ago, but now I would almost say he's almost my second favourite Italian director behind Leone. Yeah, so let me know what you think, if you have seen Property is No Longer a Theft, and what's your favourite Petri, or where can you get Petris if somebody has a sneaky supplier of Petri films. You can let me know. So thanks very much for watching this random review, and hopefully join me again for more random reviews. This is Saul Ronan from Saul Ronan Films saying farewell.